Okay, this is lesson 4, and we are going to begin talking about objects and functions. But first, we need to talk about the cycle for making changes in the IDE and saving those changes to files. As we talked about in lesson 3, these are the two files we'll be working with. This is the JavaScript file loaded in the IDE. The browser loads the index.html file. The code in the opening script tag causes the JavaScript file to load. And with this, the contents of the JavaScript file are loaded into memory, ready to execute. And now that the code is loaded in memory, controlled by the browser, we can communicate with it in the console. The cycle is to write or change lines of code in the IDE, save the changes here, refresh the browser to load the code with the changes, and test again. Right now, the value of myvar2 is 245. We change the value of myvar2 from a number to a string. We can save the change here, or more simply, press Ctrl S. Right now, the code in memory, controlled by the browser, does not show the change because the browser hasn't been refreshed. When changes are made in the IDE and then saved, they are saved in the original file. When we refresh the browser with F5, the HTML file loads, and this code in the opening script tag causes the contents of the JavaScript file to reload in the browser. We save it, we load it, and we test it. We ask the browser to return to us the value of myvar2, and we can see the value of the variable and do calculations with the variable. But you should understand something very important. The changes made in the console are only temporary for testing and experimenting. When we do things in the console, create or change variables, this activity is not saved in the file. Only when you save the changes in the IDE, they get changed in the file. Right now, in the memory controlled by the browser, the variable has a value of 245. But when I press F5 to refresh the browser, the area in the console is cleared automatically. And when we ask for the value of myvar2, we see that now the value is John, not 245. Therefore, the cycle is make changes that we want to save here, and these are saved here. Reload the HTML file with F5. The source attribute in the opening script tag causes the JavaScript file to load, and if we want, we can inspect and test the code here. You need to clearly understand this process because, as I've said before, when we talk about programming concepts, they are going to become quite difficult to understand. And you don't want to be confused when you are trying to understand the lines of code. And with that, we can begin talking about JavaScript for real. As we know, the variables are loaded into memory, specifically the stack. Primitives, such as a string, load along with the variable in the stack as well. Here we have a declared variable, therefore in the stack, but there is no value loaded with it. With objects, the variables load in the stack, but the objects themselves load in the heap. The address of the register in the heap, where the object is loaded, is stored in the stack, along with the variable. As programmers, we view the situation from the perspective of a pointer. The value in the stack, along with the variable, points to the object in the heap. And it's the same for functions. Now that the code is loaded into memory, controlled by the browser, we can communicate with it from the console. We ask for the value of a myObj, and we can see that it returns the complete object. But normally, when we're involved with an object, it's because we want to use a piece of data inside of the object. And as we know, data inside of an object is stored in the form of properties. And we get the values of the properties through the names of the properties. Now I'm going to show you something fundamental. I've written myObj, which is the variable that points to the object, and after that I've put a period. In JavaScript, when you have a period, always, 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 you are dealing with an object. An object is a box with things inside. And a period is the key that opens the box. And the menu shows us the things inside of the box. The first things in the list are the properties that you created in the object. The other properties are properties that are automatically created with every object. Normally, we're only concerned with the ones we've created. We would like the value of prop1, therefore we put in our line of code myObj.prop1, and when we press enter, we receive the value. In this line, we ask the browser for the value of prop2, and it returns an object, which is the value of prop2. And here I've changed the configuration to show more of the console. In this line, we have two periods. This means that we have a property, prop, that is inside of an object, prop2, which itself is inside of an object, myObj. As you can see, when I click in front of the yellow curly bracket, the IDE shows us a yellow line. This line helps us see the contents of the object from the beginning to the end. If I click in front of this curly bracket, it shows us another line. This line shows us the contents of this object. Considering this situation from the perspective of boxes, we have a property, prop, inside of the box, prop2, which itself is inside of myObj. To access the value of prop1, which is inside of myObj, I write this. And when I press enter, it gives us the value. This is a good time to point out that JavaScript distinguishes between large and small letters. If we write this, we receive an error because we don't have a prop1 with a small p. And it's here that I realized I wasn't following the appropriate convention for JavaScript. Remember that a convention is a set of rules that programmers follow in order to make their code easier to read and understand. Without thinking, I was using large P's at the beginning of my property names, and this isn't correct. Okay, I've made the corrections, saved them, and refreshed the browser. Here, I've simply written prop1 and received an error. The only prop1 we have in our code is inside of myObj. Therefore, in order to access it, we write myObj.prop1. This is a good time to talk about virtual spaces where our codes live. This area is called the global space. When a variable is in the global space, we can access it from any line in our code. Prop1 isn't in the global space. Therefore, we can't access it directly. We have to access it through the variable myObj, which is in the global space. These variables are in the global space, and we can access them directly. But this and this aren't in the global space. To access things here, first we have to access the object that contains these things. And to access things here, you have to execute the function. With objects, to get to the data inside of them, you have to write lines like this. The computer first gets myObj. Therefore, when you see this line, you need to see in your mind the object temporarily here. This is the way that the computer sees the situation when it processes this line. So in order to be a good programmer, you need to see the situation in the same way. Now that we have the object here, we can use the dot key to open it in order to get the value of prop1. When I press enter, it returns the value. If we want to get the value of the property prop, which is inside of the object prop2, first we have to access prop2. But we can't access prop2 directly because it's not in the global space. First, we have to access myObj, which is in the global space. To do this, we use two periods in our line of code. The first period accesses prop2, but as we talked about before, the first thing the computer does when it processes this line is access myObj. But the purpose of this line isn't to get myObj. The purpose is to get the value of the property prop. we use the dot key to open the MyObj box. But when we look inside of the MyObj box, we cannot see the property prop because it's inside of the prop2 box. MyObj.prop2 returns the prop2 box with the property prop inside. At this point, this part of the line is exactly as if we had replaced it with the prop2 object. And now that we have the object, that is the value of prop2 here, we can open it with the dot key and look inside. And what we will see is the property prop. And when I press enter, the value of prop is returned to the console. In terms of virtual spaces, prop is inside of the space of the object that is the value of prop2. Prop2 is inside of the space of the object that is the value of MyObj. And MyObj is in the global space. From the perspective of boxes, the property prop is inside of the prop2 box. The prop2 box is inside of the MyObj box, and MyObj is inside of the global space box. But the global space is more like a room. All of your code is inside of boxes that are inside of the global space room. When you are in the global space room, you cannot see all of your boxes because many boxes full of code are inside of other boxes. When you are in the global space room, you can have code directly in the room, but most of your code is inside of boxes, and those boxes are inside of other boxes. With a function, you can think of it as a kind of box, but this box is much more alive, and you can only get to its contents in the moment that it is executed. But we'll talk more about that in the next lesson. Changing the subject, we'll talk about the return of values. Right now, we're only returning values to the console, but normally we want to return the value to a variable to use later, or as we've talked about, return the value to a position in the line as it is processing. Here, the value is returned to the console, but we can create a variable to hold the value. When the value is returned to the variable, the console shows us the value. This is simply the way that this tool functions, but really the value was returned to the variable. And we can see it here. We ask for the value and it is returned. And we can reassign the value of the variable to myobj.prop2 in place of prop2.prop, as I show you here. Okay, at this time, the variable mi variable nueva is assigned to an object. And we can use the variable to get prop. But realize that we are using the variable to reassign a new value to the same variable. Right now, the variable points to the prop2 object. And we can open the prop2 box to get the property prop, which is inside. Then the variable is reassigned to the value of prop. The variable has used itself to change its own value. This is very common in programming, and it's fun to think in this way. A common example of this process is a counter. Here we create a variable x and assign it the value of 0. Then we use its actual value to change itself by adding 1. And we do it over and over. And in the end, we ask for the value in order to see it. And with that, we end lesson 4.